Hi, this is Barb Crowley, and welcome to Metaphysics, A View Through the Veil. Today we're talking to Mary Reynolds Thompson. Mary is a founder of Live Your Wild Soul Story. She is an award-winning author, internationally recognized speaker, and facilitator of journal and poetry therapy. A pioneer in the spiritual ecology movement. She lives in Marin County, California, which I was saying earlier. Lucky, lucky. Mary, thanks so much for being on the show with me. I've really thoroughly enjoyed your book, and I'm looking forward to talking to you about it. So thanks for being on the show.
Really happy to be here.
The first question I have for you, what's the spiritual ecology movement?
Very good question. Very good question. Well, in so many traditional monotheistic religions, we think of ourselves as humans as sort of being placed on the earth to dominate and steward it. Steward it in the best way, dominate in a not so good way.
In the worst way, yeah.
In the worst way,
yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
So spiritual ecology is really about reweaving our spiritual sensibility back into the fact that we are part of the web of life. And that we have one part to play, that we are not better than or lesser than, we are simply part of. So ecology understands that everything is related to everything, that anything we do affects the whole. And so it's that shift of perspective in finding our meaning, not as being these rugged, discrete individuals, but actually being part of this great earth community.
And the movement part, is that a group that's come together to make this happen, to drum it all into us?
Well, there is, yeah, no, there isn't a group. There are many, many groups.
Are there?
So what we have now is things like Green Faith, which is an organization, Church of the Wild, which is really about taking church outdoors. We have work like my own, Live Your Wild Story, explore that deep connection to nature. We have ecotherapists now. So in many different ways, even in the sort of more mainstream world of corporations, business technologies, we're beginning to understand more that we live within systems, right?
Yeah, and we affect them.
And we affect them.
Right.
Exactly. Exactly.
Right. For years, I used to say, when anxiety first started to come up at this level in the 90s, I used to say, I think it's because our bodies know that we don't know where the food supply is. And I think this is what it is, the anxiety. We don't know where the food supply is or how it happens.
It's really true. We have lost touch with earth wisdom.
And the destabilization of the human race, in my opinion, comes from a lot of that, just non-recognition of our home, basically, of I'm a city kid. I have no idea what's out there. I once stood in the middle of Missouri, my first night there, and looked out the back door over all this beautiful vegetation. And all I could say was, I could starve to death here. So I am a city kid.
Totally. The terror of the terra firma. Totally.
Yeah. And how foreign it is to me, really foreign.
Yeah, well, so many more people like yourself now grow up in urban. I mean, the whole scale has tipped towards urban living versus living on the land. So there are many of us that are completely earth illiterate. It's really true.
Right. Now, why did you come into the archetypes? How did you get here with this book?
So In the Way of the Wild Soul Woman is actually my second book on archetypes. This one very much focused on women.
What was
But
your first book? I missed the first
oh
book.
yeah, okay, it was Reclaiming the Wild Soul, How
Mhm.
Earth's Landscapes Restore Us to Wholeness. And then through being invited by an organization called Tree Sisters, which is a sort of eco-fem organization to teach the archetypes just to women, I began to really think about, well, gosh, what might they represent in women? How might women particularly embody them? And it sort of took me into this deep, deep dive into ecofeminism and what it means as women to be disconnected from the earth and what happens and the kind of power and qualities and energies that get released when we reconnect and reclaim those aspects of ourselves. But I got into it through poetry therapy.
Mhm.
So in 2001, I had always been in advertising and marketing. I love language. I had a degree in literature. What do you do with that, right? Yeah, so I
Anything,
followed.
anything you want, you can write.
Well, I ended up to make a living following in my father's footsteps, really, as an ad person. So I became
Mhm.
a copywriter and brander and everything like that. And then in 2001, I was done. And 9/11 happened, the towers came down, and
Right.
there was this real sense of I wanted my work not to feed the consumer
Mhm.
uh, society anymore, not to make of us consumers. But I didn't know where to go. And in that process, I stumbled upon this thing called poetry therapy. And I had loved and was becoming increasingly over the years intimate with the natural world, longing to spend as much time outdoors as I could. I loved language, and I was immediately drawn to the nature poets, wonderful poets like William Stafford and Joy Harjo and the Divine Mary Oliver and many, many others. And I became fascinated by this dance between inner and outer nature because their lens of the poets was always on the natural world here, but it always brought us back to the landscape in here, our inner landscape. So that's how the work sort of began to take seed.
At one point, you talk about the domination of woman and the domination of nature,
Mhm.
and you connected those two.
Yeah, very much so. Um, it's really, really true that, women have been associated with the earth, right? We refer to the earth as the
Mhm.
Mother Earth. And during the Enlightenment, as science came to the fore, and as we began to think, Descartes saying, I think, therefore I am, and we began to think of ourselves not as part of the earth, but as superior and separate from the earth. And we began to put nature literally on the rack
Mhm.
at the same time that we were burning women at the stake for being witches. We began to exploit and treat women in the same extractive way that we did the earth. We began to rape the earth, rape women, not that those things hadn't existed, but it
Mhm.
became this permission
Right.
when we said the earth isn't sentient, it doesn't have feeling, it's not our equal, that gives you permission to do anything you want to it. Women got the fallout from that. It was like
Mhm.
women became these second-class citizens to whom we could do anything. And we have. So if you look at the wounds of the earth and you look at the wounds of women, there are these amazing parallels. So, in other words, I feel very deeply that there has to be a co-healing, that we and the earth are going to restore ourselves together. That as women reclaim more of their healthy wildness, we will allow again the earth to be able to reclaim her own.
Do you see that happening now? Do you see the world turning toward, well, we've got climate change. If you're not looking, you'll be, nature will demand you look. So if you're not looking, but do you see a parallel between women rising and nature becoming our need to pay attention has become, paramount really in today's world?
So I see it sort of moving in two directions, right? We feel tremendous tension.
Mm-hmm.
And there are all these signs that women are making real progress. There are all these signs that women's rights are being diminished and demeaned and taken away from them as
Mm-hmm.
we speak. We
Right.
have all these signs that people are beginning to take climate change seriously and want to take action. And we have all these signs that our governments make promises that they have no intention of keeping, and the
Right.
fossil fuel industries continue to impact every level of our society and hold on to their power. So I think some of the anxiety we feel
Mm-hmm.
is this tension between these two opposing movements that are happening. One is just like clinging to the status quo, and one is demanding change. And so I feel both complete despair and deep hope simultaneously.
Yeah, yeah. Little schizophrenic.
A little bit schizophrenic for
Yeah,
sure.
yeah,
Yes.
yeah. Um, so this is the thoughts as you came into writing the book on the archetypes.
I was really, it was so interesting. You know how we have stories that we tell,
Mm-hmm.
right? And they feel like these sort of keystone stories in our lives. And when I began to teach the archetypes to this group of women tree sisters, the story that I told was the story of my being just a little baby in the crib. And I could hear my mother down the corridor talking to my nanny.
Mm-hmm.
And I could hear the birds outside the window behind my back. And I desperately wanted to escape the crib. So I put my little head between the bars and I got it stuck there. And I screamed bloody murder
Right.
very, very loudly. And my mother came running and she tried to push my head back in, and that didn't work. And finally, she sent in, she called, we were living in these flats, and she called for the janitor for the flats to come
Mm-hmm.
and cut me out. And I thought he was going to cut off my head.
Oh my God.
So I can
Terrifying.
absolutely terrified.
Yeah.
Of course, he cut the bars and I was set free. But that set up in me this dynamic of longing to be free, to be myself, fully myself, liberated, and also terrified.
Mm-hmm.
So when I told this story to this group of women, everyone understood that. It didn't matter. And these were women from all over the world, all different ages. They understood this, another tension, right? Of
Right.
this longing to show up fully of themselves, to give of their gifts, to speak out, to stand up, to be. And equally, this deep terror that if they did, something terrible would happen to them. So that, again, really goes back to what we do to nature, right? That, and what we did when we were subjugating nature, and subjugating women, is this understanding that if we women just allowed ourselves to be ourselves,
Mm-hmm.
something really bad would happen. And logically, we in certain countries can say, no, that surely that's not true. But in our cellular being, in our embodied memory, in our ancestral bones,
Yeah.
that doesn't feel true. Being safe doesn't actually feel true. So part of my book really became this excavation of what qualities we could cultivate, these earth-born, earth-rooted qualities that would help us together, always together, to take a stand for who we are and what we want to give to this world.
Um, I think United States is one of those countries that cannot handle strong women. Will tear them down. Will pull 'em worse than most other countries. I mean, we got third world countries that are ahead of the United States as far as acceptance of strength in women.
I agree.
I'm
I
appalled by
agree.
the United States, and it's such a deep prejudice, and that I don't think people are aware of the discrimination. I think they're just completely unaware. But for the women who have stepped out and been torn down in this country, I give them so much credit because of the courage needed to do that. And I can't think of a woman that survived it. I can't think of one. Can you?
You know, I think what you
Oh,
say
that's
is,
terrible to say, but
well, is it terrible or is it just honest? Let's,
but it's terrible reflection of
it,
Americans. But I
yeah.
can't think of one.
So when I think about women in the political, I think some very powerful women in the literary world have gotten, I think of people like Margaret Atwood and certain others who, because it's fiction, because it's
Right.
literature,
It's
because it's
the soft
poetry,
science. Yeah.
because it's have
Yeah.
had more. But if you look on the political realm, I couldn't agree with you more.
Yeah.
And I also really agree with you that this desire to tear down powerful women is unconscious. If
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
confronted the people saying, why are you saying this about this woman? Why are you believing this about this woman? Why don't you want to support women? Why haven't we had a
Hmm.
woman president?
Right.
Why are these
Right.
things happening? They would be, well, no, I love women, I support women. So
I
I
know.
feel, and there again, it goes back, we have to, America doesn't want to look back. It doesn't want to own its past in any which
We
way.
do denial very well.
We do denial. And I'll say that because my dad was an American.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
though I was born and raised in England, I hope I have permission to comment. And I've lived in America for many decades now.
Hmm.
But yeah, I think we do denial really well
Right.
because we have this, and this actually relates very much to being women too. So if I can just follow this thought, America
Yeah.
has
Do it.
this desire to be perceived as this noble, righteous, pure democracy
Hmm.
world, which it so isn't.
I
And
know.
we know the Constitution was not based on those values and all kinds of things.
Hmm.
But it always is proclaiming we're not like that. We have these
Yeah.
shootings. Or this is not America. Well, clearly it's America. It's a part
Hmm.
of America. It's not all of America. But
Right.
clearly there is this underbelly of tremendous violence and misogyny and racism and all of these things.
We have such a great story about ourselves, and
Right.
there's no way we're looking to see if
And
it's
there's no
true.
way we're looking.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now, in a much less toxic way, but still toxic to our own souls. As women, we've been encouraged to present an aspect to the world.
Hmm.
A certain way, we're so kind, we're so giving, we don't get angry, we'll care for, we'll be the caretakers, we'll do the unpaid work, the underpaid work, sacrifice ourselves for. And it can be very seductive to own that image as the sort of all-loving, all-giving, all-doing. But that stops us looking at the
Right.
gnarly bits. No, I'm actually furious.
Mm-hmm.
No,
Right.
I want this. I have a
Right.
desire and I want it. And I'm tired. I am tired of doing. So it's again this sort of sense that we become enamored by the projection rather than the reality.
I have to say, and I've always said this to everybody, and half the people just walk away from me. um, Women are born feeling vulnerable because of the strength, because of the difference in strength. We are vulnerable. I was talking to a guy, a white guy, who talked about going to India and going to all these places, and he'd just get on a train and go anywhere. Well, a woman would never do that because she can't protect herself. She doesn't have the strength, and that is just part of our anatomy, so we're born with a vulnerability and a not safe in the world because
So
of that lack of strength
the
against others who do have that strength.
Well, can I push back a little bit on
Please
that?
do. Yeah.
Yes, because I think there are women who do travel by
I
themselves to
know.
all kinds
I
of
know.
places and do all these kinds of things. But I think
I think
our
they're
one,
aware, though. I think they're aware
oh, you
that, yeah,
cannot travel as a
yeah,
woman and not be
yeah.
well,
Not
not
that it
safely
stops
travel,
women.
but
Yeah, women
yeah.
are not stopped by it, but they're aware. From the
Yeah,
moment of birth, they're
totally.
aware. Yeah.
They're totally aware. But what I would say is the vulnerability is less that we have less physical strength
Hmm.
and more that we live in a culture where men feel free to attack, rape,
Right.
hurt, manipulate women. The
Right.
real problem is systemic. In a world in which that inequity didn't exist, in which women were honored for their particular, I mean, women give birth.
Hmm.
We we're so frigging strong, it doesn't even bear
Oh,
thinking.
no, in every other way, we have the
Right.
strength. Yeah.
We have so
But
much
in
strength,
the physical,
but
yeah.
it's the way men are enculturated to believe that, it's like if you wear a short skirt and something
Hmm.
happens to you, you shouldn't have worn a short skirt.
Right. But do
It's
you ever say
always
to them, if you have money in
no,
your pocket, can I rob you? I have a right to
yeah,
rob you. You had money in your pocket.
totally. That's it. We somehow, the victim, the woman
Right.
victim, is somehow always responsible for the male behavior.
Only in when it happens to women. As I said, if a man has money in his pocket, does that give me the right to rob him? And they'll say no to that. But
Right.
it's only women as victims that don't have the right to be a victim, basically.
Yeah. I I'm not going to give you pushback on that one, Bob.
Hmm. Yeah.
I am with you. And I think, mountain woman is a very interesting one of the archetypes.
And we
Because
will
that
talk about the archetypes. We're
so
going
do you
off on.
mind if I
Yeah,
bring mountain woman
go
up
for
now?
it. Go for it.
Okay.
But
Because
there is something else I want to put in
yeah,
this, and I've talked about this a little bit with women friends, but I feel like this conversation has got to get out there for us to get over it. And you might think I'm dead wrong with this, and feel free. Um,
no.
I honestly believe it is genetically coded for women to be competitive to each other. In other words, because of this need for strength, going back, thousands of years, genetic coding was to get the man that will be strong enough to protect us and our offspring to survive. And to get that man to do it, I had to come against other women who are also looking for the same thing. So that deep in my cells, in my DNA, is a competition to other women. So where everybody says, why do women not support each other? I think it's deep in our DNA code that we are adversarial. And I think this conversation has to be put on the table because it's many thousands of years too old. It is no longer true, but I think it is there. And I think it screws us up pretty bad.
Mm.
What do you think about that?
Yeah, no, I am thinking about it, and I speak about the competition between women. I think in hunter-gatherer societies, it was a lot different. There was a lot more equality, a lot more
Community.
and you see, yeah, and
Yeah.
you see even now indigenous societies where women are very much in control of themselves, where they can divorce men.
Mhm.
They can, in other words, so it's not one thing. But I think you're absolutely right that women have learned to be competitive. And it's this, and I do agree that it's this sense of scarcity of we need a man, we need that job, there isn't enough to
Mhm.
go round, and therefore I can't let her succeed, and therefore I will bring her down. And it's actually something I talk about in the book because I feel that one of the most important things we can do as women is come together in sisterhood to support each other,
Mhm.
to uphold each other, to listen to each other, to believe each other, and to stop competing with each other. And I know it from my own life. I went to boarding school, a girls' boarding school. That'll foster a whole load of unhealthy.
I was just thinking, whoa, that's
Yeah,
bloody.
yeah. But in truth, I made some of the dearest kind of sister friends of my life there. But I
If
also,
you survive it, it is totally the tightest thing you will ever know.
right.
Yeah.
But I always remember feeling not pretty enough. I had
Mhm.
this beautiful, beautiful best friend. She is still utterly stunning. And
Right.
I always felt like the plain one. And that was very painful to me.
Hmm.
It was like this sense of I was lesser, I wasn't as good, I would never
Right.
get the boy that I wanted
Nobody could
because
see you too if you're sitting
nobody,
next to her. Yeah.
right.
I've made friends of mine go sit somewhere else.
I want a
You're
date
killing
tonight.
me
Thank
here.
you.
Yeah, you're killing me.
Yes, so it's very interesting how right from the get-go, it's women are always comparing themselves to each other. It's like
Right.
people say, well, why do you dress up or something? We very rarely dressing up for men. We're dressing up for each other.
Oh,
We're
I know.
kind of
Women
like,
do see other women and what
yeah.
we're wearing, and yeah,
I
much
know
more than men do. Yeah.
it's just like, and
Yeah.
it's very interesting to me. This is always something I find a bit comical because women have this innate knowing of where they are on the pecking order or feel they are, which I do not
Mhm.
believe in the pecking order, but the way they feel like, oh, so and so's here and I'm here. Men have no idea. You'll
Right.
see, I hate to say it, men, and I adore you, and I'm married to a fabulous man.
Right. Right.
Oftentimes you are so unself-aware about that. So you'll get this like tiny little older bald guy going up to this fabulous woman and fully expecting that she will be delighted to be hit upon by
Right.
him. And so it's a very
I've pushed
different
guys
mindset.
out of the front of a mirror to say, "Wait a minute, let me see who you see in there."
There you
Well,
go.
who are you seeing?
Yeah, so funny.
But
Yeah.
why is that? Is it that we have never been encouraged to know And then we'll go right into the architects because this is what you're addressing.
Yeah.
That we have never been encouraged um, to honor who we are, to bring out who we truly are. We're only of value in service, in appearance, and, in these outward things or what somebody else can get. And we're never truly just us, just internally us. And that is really your archetypes, what you
Well,
address.
it's certainly the essence message of the desert woman archetype, which
Mhm.
is you know, are you enough? Do you believe
Right.
that you're enough and enough yourself without doing, taking care of,
Without the
taking
world reflecting you, telling
exactly,
you who you are. Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah. And the other question I had about that, um, I sat and I thought about what do I want? Do you know I don't know the answer? I've been on Earth a long time, and I still don't, in my core, know the answer to that.
Yeah,
What
that's
do
one
I
of
want?
the desert woman questions.
Yeah.
Can I talk a little bit more about her
Yes.
to set some context
But
for?
please, yeah, let's go into the archetypes because we'll get the end of our show and never have gotten into it.
Yeah, and
So
they
let's
will
go in.
address
Yeah,
all that we've been
they
talking
do.
about, I
Yeah.
think. So desert woman is the often the first archetype we encounter on our journey. And that's because we tend not to move towards a journey of transformation until something happens in our life that is painful enough or thrilling and burning hot enough for us to want to change.
Mhm.
So Desert Woman arrives with this sense of stillness and spaciousness and invites us to see who we are when we've shed all the shoulds, all the outmoded beliefs, all that need for approval and accolades, all of
Mhm.
those things. And she says, who are you really? You know, here in the bare bones of your being, who are you?
Yeah.
And yes, what is it you really want? And so Desert Woman invites us to separate, not necessarily physically, but certainly emotionally and psychologically for a while from the rush, sped up busyness of our lives, to sit with ourselves and just begin the process of coming to know who we are, not in relation to everything else, but simply to come into relationship with ourselves.
Hmm. And how do you do that?
You make time to
Yeah.
sit, and even like you can be washing the dishes and contemplating,
Hmm.
ironing that shirt, you can take a walk. And so many feelings of agitation are going to come up, right? This is what often happens is we say that we want more time to ourselves.
Oh,
And
yeah.
then if we get some time, we get panicked and agitated. So we start scrolling
Hmm.
here, we just fill the time up. So it's this,
2020 proved that, where
yeah.
everybody said, well, I'll do this, but I don't have time. I don't. And then suddenly we had time and had to admit, we're not doing any of that.
Well, some of us did. I will tell
Yeah.
you, I wrote my book during
Hmm.
COVID. That
But
was,
a lot of us, you know,
yeah, a lot of us didn't, but a lot of us did.
yeah.
So there is, it's like those of us that were willing to actually take a deep breath and slow down. So it's hard. It takes courage. The willingness to be with yourself is one of the most vulnerable, courageous things you can be. And of course, the inner critic comes in and all the naysayers and natterers. But this is where archetypes help you.
Hmm.
Because when you hold the image of this desert woman in your hands, when you feel her inside of you as a presence, she has your back. There is this sense of support. Archetypes are very, very powerful. And so she is really asking you to awaken to the characteristics of her nature. So a desert survives on very, very little.
Mhm.
It can be so beautiful, but in a really subtle way. It needs, it when it blooms, it is extraordinary,
Yeah.
but it knows how to go dormant. And so when you begin to work with those deep metaphors, when instead of saying, oh, I've got to meditate and stare at my navel for 5 minutes, you
Mm.
just say, what would it be like to be dormant like the desert for the next 5 minutes? And just see what comes, take it slowly. We are so pressured to be busy every minute of the day that slowing down is actually one of the most revolutionary things we can do on
Yeah.
this planet, is
Mhm.
just to slow down. And Desert Woman says, and this is the truth, until you slow down, until you pay attention to what is inside of you, until you are willing to be a little bit comfortable in your own skin, change isn't going to happen. You're not going to transform. You have to have some sense of yourself to take a
Mhm.
journey of transformation, right? So if you're all chitterbrain all over the
Right.
place, it's not going to happen. You may want it, long for it to happen, but really hard for it to happen.
And you have to go to that quiet space before you can say what is working here, what is
Yeah,
not working.
yeah, totally, totally.
And you talk about grief, and that surprised me
Mm.
in that archetype. Or you want to tell the story of the woman that was walking across the desert.
Yes, I would really like to tell her story. So she wrote the memoir Tracks, and just Davidson, this brave, brave woman, Australian, who decided that she wanted to travel across the outback. And she um, people said, well, are you grieving your mother? Are you doing this? Are you doing that? She said, no, I just want to see what it would feel like to be alone. And she took this extraordinary journey across the outback,
Mm.
and just with camels and a dog, Diggity, as her companion.
Yeah.
And Robin was her first name. And so she takes this journey, and she meets with really scary stuff and stunning beauty, and she gets into this rhythm. But one day, about 2/3 through her journey, her dog, Diggity, her companion, her soulmate, eats poison that was laid down for, I think, the dingoes or something.
Mhm.
And before her, he dies, frothing at the mouth, and she can
Yeah.
do nothing about it. And she is literally heartbroken, absolutely heartbroken. And she walks on the next day and the next day, barely eating, barely drinking, until she comes to a section of the outback, which is called the clay pans. And they're literally, it's like this completely flat, hard baked rock, almost like turtle shells. So you have like this sort of mosaic of these turtle shell baked earth flat, sort of all together. And she strips down totally naked under the burning sun, and she begins to dance, and she dances her grief out. And of course, all the grief of her soul, of her life, come pouring out. And she weeps and she dances and she sweats and she burns and she moves under this desert sun until she is so exhausted, she lays down and finally goes to sleep. And even though this is not the end of Robin's journey. She still has several hundred miles to go. In a way, it is the climax, because this is why she came to the desert. This is what she came to do, to release her grief. And for me, this is so much why we as women don't sit with ourselves, is because the grief is there waiting to arise in us. And I know when my brother died suddenly from a heart attack when he was 60 years old, he's my only sibling, and the grief was phenomenal. And I danced barefoot, and I followed Robert Davidson's example, and I sweated out my grief, and I danced it, and I yelled, because in our culture we don't allow that. It's like, and where I grew up, stiff upper lip and carry on. But that grief unexpressed becomes toxic. So, and it holds us back because we become so terrified of that.
The intensity of the pain.
Of the intensity of the pain. And you don't get to live in life without things that hold that level of pain. But
do all women have grief, even if they haven't lost anyone?
I think you know the answer to that question.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we do. And I think it doesn't mean that somebody you love has died. It means that
we've lost ourselves.
We've lost ourselves. We've given up on a dream. We didn't take a job that would have been so good for us because we were afraid. We gave our life over to a man who didn't, or a woman, it doesn't matter, whatever your preference is, to somebody else who didn't value us. It's really, we are made up of layers upon layers upon layers of grief. We are also made up of layers upon layers of joy and connection and beauty. But oftentimes we can't fully experience those until we allow ourselves to feel the grief. And of course,
to let go. Yeah.
To let go. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And you call desert women the void before the conception.
I do. So on this journey of the archetypes, as I began to work with them, with women, I began to realize there's actually a rebirthing journey. So there is the barren worlds of desert woman. She is the blank page on which our story has yet to be written. She is the void before the conception. And then as we encounter forest woman, she's the dark womb, where we begin to seed our dreams, where we begin to conjure up from the very soil and soul of our being our own particular visions, where we leave the well-trodden path to make our own way. And so it's very enclosed, it's dark, it's mysterious, it's magical, it's a realm of enchantment. And it's the womb. And then in Oceans and River Woman, the waters break, right? This is the moment where our passion, our longing, our desire opens us up to become a channel for what wants to come through us, right? It's the dam comes down. We are preparing ourselves for birth. And birth is Mountain Woman, because it's how we show up and stand up and speak out in the world, visible, vulnerable, brave, but really taking a stand for what we believe. And so that's the birthing. Mountain Woman says, okay, you've done this amazing interior work. Everything has prepared you for this moment. Now it's time to act. And then Grassland Woman is really the Shiro's return. She welcomes us back into community, but that can also be a very tricky part of our journey, because of course we come running down from the mountain saying, see what I've discovered, look at me,
See
here
who
I
I
am.
am. Yeah.
Yeah, and the world goes, I kind of liked you beforehand.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
are you really sure about this? And so it's having that deep patience to nurture the newborn in you, not to give up on it, but to
Mhm.
keep coming back to it, to nurture it, to find your tribe, to find your community.
Tell me about your journey through this. Do you mind?
No, I'm
Oh,
so
good.
thrilled. And I share a lot of my journey in
Hmm.
the book and the stories of other women as well. But for me, we all have many journeys of transformation over our lives. So I'll just pick one. When I was 27 years old, I was a complete alcoholic. So, and I knew I had to quit drinking. I had a heart arrhythmia. I was blacking out. I was doing all the things that make you
Hmm.
wake up in the morning and full of shame and self-hate. It was painful. I actually had a mantra where I would look in the mirror and say, I hate you. I want to kill you. I mean,
Oh my God. Yeah.
that's how much self-hatred I had for myself.
Yeah.
So for me, Desert Woman was, first of all, very literally becoming dry by putting down the bottle, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And learning to be with myself. And I was terrified of that because I had lived, this life that I was not proud of. And I just was in an agony of self-doubt and self-revulsion.
Hmm.
So for me, I had to move in my aloneness. And that's when I became hiker walker extraordinaire, and always in nature, feeling the support of the natural world with me, and very slowly coming to terms with who I was, bit by bit by bit. So Desert Woman was a scary place for me. I didn't know if I could do this,
Hmm.
but she also provided this deep sense of space and knowing, it's okay. It's
And
okay.
and someone can do this without, I mean, you're in Marin County, beautiful place, but someone can do this in the middle of New York City as well.
Absolutely, they can, because the archetypes live inside of us.
Hmm.
So they have, when you think of deserts and a desert woman, you may have a particular vision that actually exists in the world, but archetypes are actually energies, patterns of being, clusters of characteristics that live within you. So you have
Yeah.
a desert woman in you that you can contact anytime you go
That you can go
quiet.
into. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So that was it. And then Forest Woman for me on this journey was like, well, what now?
Yeah. If I'm
This
not
big,
that, who am I?
right. And so this place of deep exploration, and also this, for me, very much a reclaiming of the sense of enchantment and magic I felt as a child, because I was always a very creative, imaginative child. I was quite telepathic.
Mhm.
I had prescient dreams. I was actually very connected to realms, I guess you could say.
Yeah.
And so it was really an invitation to go exploring in this way, very intuitive, embodied. I'd numbed my body for so long, but now my body was waking up and I could begin to explore in that much more feral way.
Hmm.
And then Ocean and River Woman was, if what did I really want? What was my longing, my desire, what was I passionate about? I mean, when I got sober, if you'd asked me who I was or what I wanted, I would have been clueless.
Yeah.
Not one thing, except for I want to drink, right? Which is not a
Hmm.
great answer for a
Yeah.
life. And so this was really about reclaiming those deep passions that I had, and actually the fact that I'm a very passionate person, which had also been, and was one of the ways I drank, was just so that I could release that, because it had been so kind of knocked out of me. And then for me, Mountain Woman was this beginning of this work of my soul, of connecting people to their inner nature through these nature earth archetypes and nature metaphors. And that was like when all of this work, all of this getting sober, all of this learning to just be with who I am, it's leading somewhere. And for the first years of doing this work, especially with Reclaiming the Wild Soul, which originally came out in 2014, people just thought I was a woo-woo idiot. I mean, I could, it was like nobody got it. The
Yeah.
world had not caught up yet. And so I would often cry. I would be like, oh, I can't do this. I go to networking events, God forbid. I don't do those now. Where people would just like glaze over, when I was trying to say what I was doing. And so there was a lot of hurt and pain. But I never let go. And that really was the grassland woman bit. It's like finding, I knew my purpose. I knew my sacred medicine. I believed in it enough. I trusted it enough that I just didn't let go. And, it's been my work for 20 years, and 10 years very more publicly, but it took
Right.
10 years
And
before
the
that to be seeking it.
reciprocity in grassland woman.
Yeah.
What is that?
Well, I think one of the things that we might all agree upon is you cannot have a transformation anymore that is just about you, right? We don't live in those times. Carolyn Mace, the great archetype woman and healer,
Yeah.
she says, the days of just living on the mountaintop top are over.
Yeah.
The world needs us. So reciprocity is this shift in viewpoint from an extractive viewpoint to this understanding that everything is about giving back. The earth gives to us every day, we give back. Our friends give to us every day, we give back. We are in constantly, even to the point where we know, just like the denizens of the grasslands, to leave more soil than we arrived with, to leave more soul than we arrived with, to be generous, full of a kind of a generosity of spirit that stems from gratitude and a sense of how we've been graced by this world.
Throughout your book, you bring people step by step through, giving them journal prompts and creativity. It's not always poetry, but creativity to help them move along. Really, what happens if somebody gets stuck?
You have the best
I'm not
questions
talking
there,
about
Bob.
me.
Well,
a friend of mine.
I laugh because when I was doing the Tree Sisters course, Claire Dubois, who founded Tree Sisters, got stuck in Desert Woman. And it was so funny because each week we'd meet and I'd be moving us forward to Forest Woman. And she'd say, well, it's all very good, but I'm still in Desert Woman. I was like, shh, shh, shh.
Yeah.
So I don't think it's possible to be stuck. And I'll tell you why. If there are actually almost 80 journal prompts, rituals, meditations,
it really
practices.
is very well laid out for anyone who picks up this book to make this journey, really.
Thank you.
So, yeah.
And if you're stuck, you move. You may not want to be in this place. So I've laid it out as this linear journey, and we talked about it as this sort of rebirthing journey. But the truth is, you may feel mountain woman, just want to start there, or you may feel ocean and river woman, and there's no wrong. So if you get stuck somewhere, it's probably because that archetype isn't kind of speaking to you at the moment. It will speak to you because all of them do, and all of them are within us. But maybe you need to go back to another one, or jump ahead to another one. So in other words, don't regiment yourself. If anything is about this, it's like, it's be free within the book. Just go, read a little story there are tons of little stories that could just provoke some
Yeah.
thinking.
Fascinating
Do a
stories.
journal
Yeah.
prompt,
Yeah.
just allow yourself to do it. And also, I'm going to be starting a book circle soon, because I do believe very deeply this is a book that it really benefits if you do it with your sisters. The
Mhm.
whole, we talked about this competition between women, and
Yeah.
so much of this book is about sisterhood. It's about supporting each other through the process. So if you have a friend or a couple of friends who also want to take the journey, that's a wonderful way to do it.
Mhm. And you can do it more than once in your lifetime. I mean, as we change through our
Yeah,
lives, it's always good to come back to who am I now?
absolutely. And you can do it as a daily practice. I have an altar up on my hill that I go to, and I sort of make a little prayer ritual to each of the archetypes, and then I ask, where am I feeling?
Mhm.
Which archetype am I really feeling in my body today? And is that the archetype that I need to call on, or is there another archetype that, so for example, do I really want to go into a very sensitive um, conversation as desert woman? Well, maybe I do, because maybe I know silence is going to be a big part of that.
Mhm.
Maybe I know that I need to be less literal, and therefore forest woman. So in other words, it's like as you get
Right.
to know them, you dance with them.
Right. Right. We have come to the end of our conversation, I hate to say it. So I want you to let everybody know where they can get hold of your book. And is it out now or is it coming
Well,
out?
so you can get it from my publisher, Inner Traditions, right now. It will be available on Amazon
Mhm.
and other bookstores on May 14th. And
2024.
2024. Thank
Yeah, yeah,
you.
yeah.
And you can find out anything and everything on my website, which is just
Mhm.
MaryReynoldsThompson.com.
And on your website, they can come and work with you if they choose,
I
take some
have,
of your classes.
yeah, I have a lot of different ways that you can
Mhm.
engage. And then
And you can
soon this,
also take an archetypical archetype uh, questionnaire, which I took. Yeah,
okay.
which
Yeah,
I
there's a
took.
wild, if you go to my book page, The Way of the Wild Soul Woman, you'll find a quiz pop up, and you can just go there and
Mhm.
find out which archetype in this moment is
Yeah,
speaking to
in
you.
this moment, because it was like, I'm desert woman, but I like people.
There's a
um,
woman likes people too. She just
yeah.
likes certain people.
But that was in the morning having coffee that I didn't want to talk to anybody. I wanted to be in my own space. Yeah. Um, and what is your website? Is it your name?
It is MaryReynoldsThompson.com.
Okay, it's MaryReynolds Thompson THOMPSON.com. Okay, great. Mary, thank you so much for being on with me. I've loved our conversation.
Thank you.
Take care and have a great book launch.
Thank you.
Bye bye.